I think a vast majority of Americans can retire in 10 years or less if they're making at least $70,000 per year. If you want to retire in 10 years or less, the number one thing that you need to do is just get creative with your money. And so the important thing here is to realize that saving is not a sacrifice, it's an opportunity. And so you're gonna have to live a little bit differently than most people in order to make this happen. Live in the least expensive apartment that you can. Get roommates, house hack. Buy a 2-bedroom apartment or 3-bedroom and rent out the other rooms to keep your housing expense as low as possible. If you can cut your housing expense from $2,000 to maybe $600 or $700, which is actually pretty easy to do with roommates in a vast majority of cities, all of a sudden, you've cut 10 or 15 years off the time that it's taken to retire or will take you to retire. The next thing is, if you're making $70,000, the one thing that I recommend that you do is go out and just try to make a little extra money. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to go out and try to make an extra $10,000 or more per month. But every $1,000 that you make and invest instead, that's going to cut literally months off the time that it'll take you to retire. And so if you're making $70,000, launch a couple side hustles. Freelance on the weekends, and freelance to invest. So I always encourage you, after you're saving as much as you can, just go out and try to make a little more money with the explicit goal of trying to become financially independent as quickly as possible. And then the final thing, just stick with it. That's the most important piece of advice. So I see a lot of people that get really excited and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go out and become financially independent. I'm gonna retire early. And then you check back in with them like 90 days later and they're no longer doing it. But this is one of those things where it can actually get pretty fun and it can get really addictive. And so the thing is, once you start saving and you go from saving 5% to 50%, just look at your bank account every day for 5 minutes. That's what I did. And you're gonna start seeing your money grow. And that's all the motivation that you're going to need, I promise you. And then it becomes like a game where you're like, oh my gosh, this could actually be possible. Even if it takes you 12 years or 15 years, you've still retired early. The average retirement age is between 62 and 65 in the United States. So no matter when you're starting, if you can do it even in 15 years or less, or 20 years or less, that's a whole lot more time you have to do whatever you want.